Today you have Q&A. On your 240 Q&A, you have Social Security, Woodville, Mississippi, Geary, Stockton, 10th, Charity, Mr. Green, Christmas Eve, Dallas, First, California, California Street, French Quarter, Cynthia Turner, Ms. Turner, Ford Explorer, and Camaro. This is your 240 Q&A for 5 minutes. Ready? Do you know your social security number offhand?
No, I don't. Sorry.
How far did you get in school, sir?
12th grade.
Where did you finish high school?
Woodville, Mississippi.
Is that where you're originally from?
Yes.
How long have you been living in here?
Since 69.
Are you currently employed?
I'm self-employed.
I understand that you perform cement work.
Correct.
What kind of cement work do you perform?
Driveways, patios, walkways, additions.
Just when the slab is poured, you're one of the laborers that gets out there and smooths it out, things like that?
Correct.
My understanding is that there is not a lost wage claim that's being asserted in this case, so I don't believe I need to get too far into your employment. But just as a general background, is there anybody that you work with most often, or is there a group of people that you work with?
My brother.
I understand it's the type of occupation where whoever calls you, you're going to go out and do a job for.
Approximately.
When you go out on these assignments, I know that we talked about how you would be one of the fellows that gets out there and smooths out the concrete after it's poured. However, what else do you do as part of your occupation?
That's about it. Operate the machine, a trowel machine.
That's the small mixer?
The trowel machine. After your concrete has hardened, you put it on there. It has 4 big blades on it, trowel blades. They call it a trowel machine.
That kind of keeps it liquid until you can get it down?
No, that's after it has hardened, to put the slickness onto it.
I understand what you're saying. Approximately how heavy is that machine?
Probably 100 pounds, 150 pounds maybe.
Do you have to lift that machine often?
Sometimes, not all the time.
When you do you have assistants to move it around?
Oh yes, 3 or 4 men is on it.
We're here primarily to talk about an incident on, I believe it was October 9 of 1994. Do you remember what day that was?
No, I can't remember what date it was.
I mean, do you remember what day of the week it happened?
Not exactly, but I believe it was a Sunday.
Do you remember what time of day it was, or should I say, do you remember about what time?
7:30 or 8 o'clock. I remember it was around first dark.
Was that in the evening or morning?
Evening.
Where did the accident take place?
It was on Geary and Stockton.
I think that the police report in the lawsuit say Geary and 10th.
All right, I got it mixed up. That's correct. It's right by the post office, I believe.
Do you remember where you were heading at that time?
I was going to the hospital.
What hospital?
Charity.
How long have you practiced law?
I've been licensed since 1980.
It's my understanding, Mr. Green, that you witnessed an accident on Christmas Eve in 1994. Do you recall that?
Yes, that was in Dallas.
Do you recall about what time of day or night the accident happened?
Best of my recollection, it was afternoon, somewhere around 1:30.
But it was in the daytime?
Yes.
Do you recall where the accident happened?
I could not tell you the names of the streets. I believe it was near First and a street that crossed First.
Does California and First sound familiar?
That sounds familiar.
Were you driving or riding in an automobile?
I was driving.
Do you recall what street you were on?
I was on the street that crossed First.
So you would have been on California Street?
Correct. That's the name of the street.
Do you remember which direction you were traveling in?
I was traveling towards the French Quarter.
Do you remember what the weather was like that day?
No, not specifics. I realized that there was not precipitation.
To the best of your recollection, were the roads wet or dry?
They were dry.
Do you remember how many lanes of traffic or lanes of travel there are on California Street where you were?
I'm real confused about the streets in Dallas, whether they are 1 or 2 lanes approximately. I remember being in 1 lane. However, it seems to me like it could have been marked for 2, or it could have been available for 2 lanes.
Was anyone in the car with you?
Yes.
Who was that?
Her name is Cynthia Turner.
Are you related to Ms. Turner?
No, I'm not.
Was it her car you were driving?
Again, I'm confused whether it was my Ford Explorer or her automobile. Something tells me it was my truck we were in.
Was there a traffic control device at that intersection?
Yes, there was.
What type of device was it?
It was a stoplight.
Before the accident happened, were you traveling, or were you stopped just before the accident happened?
Well, we had stopped. I had stopped second in line at the signal. There was an auto ahead of me, and then the signal turned green. I started to move forward, then the accident occurred.
Was your car involved in the accident?
No, it was not.
You said there was one automobile in front of you?
Yes.
Was that automobile involved in the accident?
Yes, it was.
Do you remember what kind of automobile that was, or what color it was?
I think it was a green automobile.
Do you remember how many people were in that car?
1 person.
Just the driver?
Just the driver, right?
Now, you said you had been stopped for the red light just prior to the accident.
That's correct.
Do you remember how long you had been stopped?
I certainly don't.
Are you certain that the signal turned green before the automobile in front of you started to move?
Yes.
Do you recall the other vehicle that was involved in the accident?
I want to say it was a blue Camaro. I think it was a blue car. I want to say Camaro, but I don't know.
Do you remember how many people were in that car?
One person.
That would be, again, just the driver?
Correct.
Do you remember which part of the vehicle collided with a Camaro and the other car you believe was green?
The front end of the green car impacted the front end of the blue automobile.
Therefore, they more or less impacted front to front.
It wasn't nose on nose. One of them had to hit the side of the other one, but I don't remember which one specifically hit the side.
Now, the Camaro that you saw that you believe was the blue Camaro, what street was it traveling?
On First, I believe.
If you remember, do you know which direction it was going in?
It was coming from our left.
Going to your right?
Going to my right. That's correct. It seems to me that it was a one-way.
Okay, on your 225 Q&A number 1, you have viaduct and hemorrhoidectomy. This is going to be your 225 Q&A number 1 for 5 minutes. Ready? Have you ever been in any other automobile accident other than this particular one?
Oh, 30 years ago.
What kind of an accident was that?
I just fell asleep and turned my car over.
I assume you suffered some injuries in that accident.
Slight damage to my shoulder, and that was it.
Were you hospitalized or anything like that?
No.
That was 30 years ago?
Yes.
Any other accidents in the past 30 years besides this one?
Nothing serious, no.
How about ones that weren't so serious?
Just a little fender bender here and there.
What kind of fender benders did you have? How many of those have you had?
I just hit a tree once in the driveway.
A tree?
Yes, slid into it.
When was that?
About 79.
Was that in your own driveway?
No, in a customer's driveway.
Did you have to seek any medical help then?
No, I just bent the car a little bit.
How about any other fender benders?
Nothing I can think of.
Any automobile accidents or any type of since this accident that you've been involved in?
No.
Have you ever had any types of falls around the house, fallen off the ladder or tripped on the stairs?
No.
Have you ever studied medicine or any aspect of medicine?
No.
How about the law? Have you ever studied the law?
No.
Give me your description of how this accident occurred on December 30 that you were involved with.
I was just waiting for a red light, and the last thing I knew, I was being bounced around in the car. It happened so fast I didn't see him coming.
Which way were you proceeding? Were you going west?
I was going west over the viaduct, yes.
And you were alone at the time?
Yes.
Do you recall observing the truck behind you before the accident?
No.
You never saw the truck before the impact occurred?
No, I was just looking straight ahead.
Were you stopped for a light, or was there traffic, or why were you stopped?
I was waiting for the traffic light right on the middle of the viaduct. I was sitting there for 10, 15 seconds.
How were the road conditions at the time?
As I remember, they were dry and there was no snow. It was just rocks, the gravel on the road from the previous snow.
Sanding type of gravel?
Yes, nothing other than that.
Did you have any indication of an impact before the impact occurred?
No.
Did you ever hear any screeching of brakes, anything like that?
No.
So I guess you don't know the speed of the truck that hit you, is that right?
No idea.
What happened after the impact?
Well, he came up to see how I was.
Did the impact move your car at all?
Yes. It pushed me into the car that was stopped in front of me, and I got rattled around in the car. Even pulled the seatbelt loose.
The seatbelt?
Yes.
Where did it break loose?
It just unbuckled and I smashed my leg. I imagine I hit the steering wheel because I got pushed forward and I broke the seat. It just laid my seat back straight.
What did it break on the seat?
I guess they call it the track.
You mean the back of the seat broke so it flopped back?
Yes.
Had you had any problems with the seat before the accident?
No.
Was this your own car?
Yes, it was.
Do you have any idea how far your car was moved forward from the impact?
It would have to be 5 or 6 feet. That's normally the distance I stop between a car at a light.
Do you know if it was 5 or 6 feet on this incident, or if it was more or less than that?
I'd say approximately that.
Is it your recollection that you were fully stopped for about 10 to 15 seconds before you were hit?
Yes.
Are you that certain?
Yes.
Did you have any conversation with the driver of the truck after the accident? What occurred after the accident?
He was just wondering how I was, and he told me that he was sorry, naturally. He told me that he had been just watching the trains at the time.
Prior to the accident, did you notice any smoke from the trains or anything like that?
I wasn't paying attention to the trains.
When you were at the scene of the accident, did you have any conversation with the truck driver about how the accident occurred? Any further discussion with him?
All he had told me was that he was watching the trains, and that was about it.
Did he give you any more specifics about that? Is that what he said, or is that kind of your recollection of what he said?
No, that's what he said.
Any more discussion about how it occurred?
No, he just told me he was watching the trains and looked up, and there I was.
What was done with your car? Did you drive it from the scene?
Yes, I drove it.
Were you able to drive it home?
Yes, we went down off the viaduct and the bumper was just hanging on and we took that off. In fact, it just about fell off and he threw it in the back of his truck and I went back to the office. Then I went from there to the doctor.
Were you able to drive your car to the doctor?
Yes.
What did you eventually do with your car? Was it repaired or did you sell it?
No, they totaled it out.
The insurance company?
Yes.
Was that your insurance company that paid you for that?
No, it was his, I believe.
Did you get a check?
Yes.
Okay. Have you seen any other doctors prior to the automobile accident?
No.
Were you in any hospitals in the 10 years before the accident?
No. You said 10 years, right?
Am I getting close? How about 15?
Well, I was just thinking of hemorrhoids. That has nothing to do with the back.
I understand you had a hemorrhoidectomy a year before the accident, or when did that occur?
No, that went back to 77 or 78.
For some reason, I was under the impression it happened around 1985, but that was wrong.
That's wrong.
Now, is there anything else you would like to tell me that would be an aftermath, so to speak, from this accident? We already talked about the physical and emotional effects.
Well, how do you mean?
Any financial problems, other? Okay, on your 225 number 2, you have Jerry Ott, Mr. Gray, Perfect Realty, Mary, conditional assignment of interest, Don, conditional promissory note, installment land contract, defendant's deposition exhibit 2, and receipt and option contract. This is 225 number 2 for 5 minutes. Ready? Okay. So as far as you know, Jerry Ott will not be at trial on Monday to testify on your behalf?
As far as I know, that's true.
You indicated that Mr. Gray was the agent for Mary.
Yes.
How did you make that determination that he was Mary's agent?
He represented himself that way. He was the salesman for Perfect Realty at the time.
Did you also have a realtor representing you?
Yes, Jerry Ott.
Jerry Ott? And who was Jerry Ott with?
Perfect Realty.
So they were both with Perfect Realty.
Yes.
You say Mr. Gray represented himself as the agent for Mary. How was that representation made?
I was told, Jerry Ott told me that was his role in this matter, and he introduced himself that way. At the showing, he represented himself as Mary's agent.
I guess I understand that you felt that he represented himself as Mary's agent, but how did he verbalize that representation if in fact he did at all?
He just told me.
He said, I'm Mary's agent. He introduced himself?
Or words to that effect, yes. I'm a marketing specialist for Perfect Realty, and I'm Mary's agent.
Do you know for a fact that he said that?
That's my best recollection.
But are you testifying today that he did say the word agent when he introduced himself?
No, I would not testify to that. Whether the word agent was used or not, I can't be sure.
Okay, so you know that he showed up with Mary, is that right?
Yes.
But is it fair to say that you have no recollection beyond that as to whether or not he was Mary's agent?
He conducted himself as her agent at the closing.
Tell me how he conducted himself as her agent at the closing.
He reviewed the closing papers and advised her on what they were and what they meant and whether or not she should sign them.
And because of that, you interpreted that to mean that he was her agent?
Yes, he certainly acted like he was.
He did. How did he advise her regarding the closing papers?
Well, there were a large number of those papers and he would review them. And if Mary had any questions about what they meant, he would explain them to her.
Do you remember specifically anything that he said to her?
I'd have to scratch my head on that for a while.
Well, if you don't recall, that's fair too. I'm just trying to figure out whether you remember or not.
With regard to that hypothecation, which you were asking me about earlier on exhibit number 2, he did make the comment that it would not restrict Mary from selling that property and that he thought that was advisable. He thought that was okay.
You are talking about the $11,000?
Yes, secured by a conditional assignment of interest.
All right. Was Mary told about the conditional assignment of interest prior to May 4, 1979, as far as you know?
As far as I know, no. If she was told, then it would have been by Dawn.
As far as you know, was she told about the conditional promissory note before May 4, 1988?
I would not know that either.
As far as you know, did Dawn even know about those documents before May 4, 1988?
Yes, Jerry Ott represented to me that he did know about that and he was agreeable. As I recall, the initial proposal was $16,000 to be secured by some property. At the last minute, I think it was on the day of closing, we negotiated that amount to be $11,000 secured by one property instead of 2 properties.
Now, you said Jerry Ott represented to you that Dawn knew. Do you have any firsthand knowledge whether Don knew or not, or are you relying on what Jerry Ott told you?
Prior to closing, I relied on what Jerry Ott told me at the time of closing.
Okay, you were present.
Yes, I was present and Don talked about that.
The installment loan contract identified as defendant's deposition exhibit 2, as far as you know, is that the last contract that was executed by the parties?
That is not the installment land contract.
I'm sorry, the receipt and option contract?
Yes,
Was that the last receipt and option contract executed by the parties?
as far as I know, that's right.
So then does this represent the understanding, the entire understanding between you and Mary regarding the purchase of the property?
There is one difference that I might mention.
Okay,
At the time that I sold the 2 properties to Mary, and when she bought the 2 properties, our agreement was that each property was for $8,000 down. Now, this particular document shows $4,000 paid down on this one.
just representing half of the 2 properties?
The other property showed $12,000 down.
I see.
There was no good reason for that change, but I think that I asked that in order to show the real estate commission and the difference between the 2 properties.
But as far as you know, that was the last contract signed. I think you just testified there was no contract reflecting any other amounts, was there?
I don't believe so.
This was the agreement between you and Mary?
To the best of my knowledge, that's right.
As far as you know, there is no document that shows Mary's initials?
I suspect she was asked to initial that at the same time that she was asked to sign this, but I don't have a copy of that.
I think you testified earlier that you're not sure if she signed this before or after the changes were made.
That's right. She was required to sign that twice, and that copy has been signed once by Mary.
Well, do you have a copy that's been signed twice by Mary?
No, I don't.
Do you know if she in fact signed it twice?
When I asked about that, I was told she did.
Who told you that? Jerry Ott?
He was the one.
Why would she have been required to sign it twice?
Well, if you read the terms of that, there is such a requirement. The property has to be inspected and approved by her,
I see.
and a second signature required.
So under paragraph 8, there would be a second signature required. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
The closing was held on May 4, 1988.
Yes, that is correct.
Who was present at the closing?
Jerry Ott, Mr. Gray, myself, and Mary of